always such a special time of year to see the work of our senior studio artists, see what they're up to in their studios, and share their work as part of an exhibition. This is the result of a year-long process that begins with a junior year portfolio review, and then they begin to refine their themes, their working methods. And so each of our artists is going to share a little bit about their practice, the work that they have included in the show, and then ask them to elaborate a bit more on their process. Okay, I'm going to ask Saxon to get us started this afternoon. Saxon, could you share a little bit about the work that you have included in the exhibition right next door?
So I'm a installation artist, and I make pieces that are reminiscent of like educational museum exhibits to sort of teach about trans realities and trans people, just to kind of highlight their experiences, especially when their realities are being underrepresented in our society due to, certain rhetoric being pushed forward. But I make works that highlight more science-based elements. So like I have pieces that are talking about natural elements and how that relates to trans elements as well.
To include installation, and can you talk a little bit about the different components of this installation?
Yeah, so this installation has, the first piece I want to talk about is Hermaphroditia. That has, it's a wood-based installation with large wood cards that have different animals that experience hermaphroditic change throughout their lifespan, which is just at some point during their life cycle, they change their sex to kind of further their life cycle. So I have certain animals like a green frog, a clownfish, earthworms, all of them kind of experience either intersexuality or some specific change in their biological sex. And then I have a work with a rug and card installation. The cards connect to the rug itself, which functions as a timeline, and that highlights specific people in our recent U.S. history that are trans and haven't been really talked about as much. So each of the cards has a bit of their personal history and what I think of them as a person, and you can collect those cards to connect to the rug itself. And then the last piece is a hanging book that you can look through that talks about the rates of regret that connects to gender-affirming care, something that's kind of been villainized in recent media. And I connected to other really accessible services that other people regret way more. It's kind of highlighting how maybe one service isn't more like bad, and these are really easy to get to ones. Yeah.
I'm going to ask T to go next.
Hi, so I'm a printmaker. Oh, sorry, hi. Hi, so I'm a printmaker. So my work often deals with the interrelations between humans and non-human animals and sort of our relationship as a whole to nature, since humanity often sort of separates ourselves and views nature as this separate entity or like being that we often abuse and like take advantage of and just for our own benefits, but we are a part of that ecosystem in nature, and that's oftentimes forgotten. So with my works, I like to use animal subjects instead of people to kind of explore that relationship and show that like we aren't as disconnected from nature as we like to think we are.
And so you have 4 prints included in the show, and some of the aesthetic inspiration?
Yeah, so my prints, like format-wise, are all inspired by tarot and tarot imagery. So I often, what I was doing for these prints is I would find animals that had either like folklore or mythology and just had symbolism that would relate to the cards that I would then pair them with and correlate. And a lot of them have themes, obviously, of like life and death, and exploring those cycles that occur throughout everyone's life at different stages.
Thank you, T. Parker.
Hello. I have 5 pieces in the show, and I work a lot with found objects and archival imagery and text. I have about, I think I have 3 cabinets and 2 wall pieces. And they are inspired by religious art, specifically Catholic art, and I make them so they can be interacted with as devotional objects. And I am dealing with historical expressions of femininity, both oppression and empowerment.
Charlie?
Hi, I'm Charlie, and I'm a studio art major and a communication studies major. And so my work, I kind of deal with like stain painting and assemblage sculpture. A lot of my pieces include like personal items, and I also like to work with clay and kind of just random materials I like to kind of experiment with. And my key themes deal with femininity and sexuality and just kind of female empowerment from certain like traumatic experiences that happen. And yeah, it's kind of like taking back that power and control. And yes, these pieces are very personal, therapeutic, and yeah.
So the 2 pieces that you have here, can you tell us the titles of the work?
Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry. So this is an installation piece called Beginning of the End, and yes, that's my own dress, my own bed sheet, and my own pillowcase, and I kind of yes work with those. And then this over here is I call it clips, and it's zip tie with clay and it's expired gesso that kind of hides the wall. Yeah.
So I mentioned earlier that this process is a very special year, long process that you've gone through, where you receive feedback regularly. You have critiques both with your peers in this course, senior studio, senior seminar, and also with museum staff and of course the faculty of the studio art department. And so it refines your work over time. It's a rigorous process. I'm curious if you could each share a little bit about that journey, where you started, maybe with your junior portfolio review, and where you're ended here. How did you arrive at these final works? Do we want to start with Saxon?
So, starting with my junior portfolio review, I was really focused on like book arts and making interactive works because I liked having pieces that ensure that the person would be, understanding what they're learning or what they're getting out of the piece. And so, with those and kind of going to the ball show, I had made 2 book art pieces and some posters on the wall, and these are 2 of those book art pieces from Macropedia and Transgender Timeline. And both of those works got reworked into the larger pieces that I have that are more museum style exhibits. And that came from kind of during the fall show, I noticed that people were apprehensive to kind of touch the book art pieces just because they're smaller and I guess daintier than a big wooden board. And so I decided to really blow up the scale of them to ensure that people would touch them and not be afraid to like maybe break the works or something like that. And then additionally, I found that the science museum style of the pieces kind of clued people into that they should be touching the works, that they should be learning from these pieces. And I really liked that kind of additional concept that came with kind of making these specific forms. And I liked how I could continue to use book art elements while still making these bigger pieces.
I'm curious, so since you had this evolution of your understanding of the viewer, if after the opening, if that has changed any further. I know we just opened this exhibition on Friday, but has that even changed, working with these large wooden pieces, working with this kind of science center aesthetic for your installations? What has that been like, seeing them out in the wild now?
It's definitely been really cool seeing people kind of activate the pieces and seeing them do what they're supposed to do. And it's kind of fun because I was really hopeful that people would touch them the way I wanted them to. And because I was looking at my friends kind of at the exhibition, they knew that they should be touching the works, which told everyone else that they should also be handling this stuff. So I think people have been, engaging with the things as they probably should be and learning what they should be too. And that's good.
Yeah, I was watching a man earlier today who was like fumbling around with them, and he made a loud noise with it, and he felt very awkward and wanted to apologize to me. And so it's interesting to see the way that visitors actually, beyond what we intend with the work, and it sounds like you have that with these artists' books, how they actually engage with the work of art. I thought it was actually a very funny kind of way, this kind of awkward treatment of these very large wooden block elements that are quite heavy too. Tia, do you want to tell us a little bit more about your working process and how that has changed?
Yeah. So with my JPR, my work was actually more centered around fears and like where that comes from. But through that work, I started using the animal subjects, and that's kind of how I segued into more of this interrelation and connection with non-human animals. And in the fall, a lot of my work, while I was still working with prints, all of my prints here for this show are all screen prints, but all of the prints I had in the fall are all leaf prints, where I, for all of them, the imagery I carved on like blocks and printed those. And for the two pieces on the ends, I was making handmade paper, and that was a big part of my process as well, that I then strayed away from here. Is because as I started to kind of hone in what I wanted to do, it was really this piece, what I included again in the fall, that really helped me kind of figure out where I was going for this exhibition in terms of like composition and style and theming, because before then, that was the first piece that I really had based off of like thinking about the connections between like material imagery as well as like the mythology and folklore of these animals.
When we were prepping for the panel, and you mentioned that you will return to handmade paper, can you talk about that process a little bit?
So yeah, I would have, part of why I stayed away from it is just unfortunately it's a very time-consuming process, but it's something that I would very much like to get back into. It's very therapeutic for me as well, just the whole paper making process, because when I make my paper, I like to include a lot of natural elements like tea leaves that I have brewed previously, or just like any piece of foliage that I can find outside. I really like including that into my paper to kind of bring back that natural element, because paper comes from trees, but we don't really think about it too much.
And could you build on that a bit more too, like your relationship to nature and how that has changed
Yeah,
in this process?
Yeah, for sure. Working on the show is really, I feel like I've definitely have more appreciation for it and feel more connected to nature just as a whole. Because while like, that's such a Florida because it was very hot, but traveling with like family over the years and going to places like Tennessee and being able to like hike in the woods and being out with nature and that, I really like it, just the serenity and the feelings that come with doing that and going on a hike or just being out in nature. I really liked but felt connected to as I started doing, this research on animal-human connections and all of that, and it just sort of evolved from there.
Yeah, I love this kind of attunement to or sensitivity to nature and the environment, or in Saxon's case, this kind of attunement and sensitivity to the viewer. And I'm curious for Parker, your sensitivity to media and to different materials that you're working with. These are found object sculptures. So could you talk a little bit about that and how your process also refined through the year?
Yeah, so I've always used like found imagery. So I've included the photo on the left is from our halfway show, and the photo on the right shows a piece I made of Rollins Museum that was kind of like the beginning of the body work that is on exhibition right now, or on view. So I think I had this problem where I was trying to do too much at once. I had too many ideas. I had the same like aesthetics pretty much, but I had too much, like too many threads that I was pulling at that just was kind of like didn't lend itself to cohesive body work. So I over winter break decided like I have to limit myself to like one place to get the images from and one place to get the text from. And that like limit I put on myself really helped like create a very like body of work, because I've never been very good at that. But I think that the putting limits on yourself can really help that whole process.
So this refinement process that
Yeah.
you're going through. I'm curious if any of the other ideas, much like tea with the handmade paper, if there are other ideas you will come back to and revisit from this earlier halfway show. So in the fall, they also have an exhibition in the Cornell Fine Arts Center next door. If there are other ideas that you'll play with in other bodies of work.
Yeah, I wanted to keep doing like more of the play stuff, but it didn't really fit with the aesthetic vibe of this work, so I removed that for these purposes, but I would like to go back and do more play stuff.
Was there a moment in this kind of exhibition process where you recognize that refining, or you recognize I need to separate this out? When did that occur? What was that?
Definitely over winter break. I was like reflecting on the work from the half show and it's all over the place. And also like getting critique back from the property that doesn't feel as connected as it should.
Okay, so part of that refinement was also identifying this historical archive that you were tapping into. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, that I actually found over the summer, like last year, one of my professors, Audrey, that's her word. She was like, you should read this book on the invention, I think it's called like the invention of hysteria. And it's mainly about like photography theory. So it wasn't like that whole portion wasn't really something I looked into, but it told the history of this hospital where the pictures are from, the La Salpêtrière in France. And it talks about like this neurologist, Charcot, who kind of created this illness out of, thin air almost, of like, and then was documenting it in these pictures, which are the pictures that I use in my work. And they were very, I think like the first time I saw them, I was like, oh, these are like very horrifying. Like, and for the first time, I was like, I kind of saw a lot of them, and I was like, I want to eat this. Because there's hundreds of them, and they're all really different and interesting, and I just felt like I was called to them.
Okay. So I want to come back to these historical images that you're working with. I do want to switch to Charlee first and thinking about how you refined your working process through the year, your sensitivities to some of these concepts and ideas, where you were deriving your iconography from. Talk to me about how you arrived at this particular installation.
So my process is very hands-on and experimental, I'd say. So I originally worked with bed sheets in Dawn's class, contemporary art and theory, and that's where I kind of started kind of experimenting with my own bed sheets and kind of tracing my body and trying to do this technique called stain painting, where you basically mix water and paint, and you can either pour it directly on, or you can pour water first and then you pour the paint on. So it's like cool. Like you can really just experiment with it, and I find it really fun and just kind of I don't know. It's like a nice feeling to like kind of take control of your body in a way like that, in a creative way. And so that's me doing that. And and then so over on the right is a dress that has like kind of significant meaning to me. So that's what's in the exhibition over there. That is actually combined with a bed sheet, and it's a nice process. It's very, I guess, like reclaiming. Like that's the word I use for my process.
Okay, and can you talk a little bit more about the dress? I'm thinking about what Parker said about encountering these images, and you felt horrified. I think is the word that you said, that you knew that they were calling to you. So how did we arrive at this kind of choice of the dress? I know you said you were experimenting with bed sheets, but that's very deeply personal to use your own dress and to create this kind of stain painting. Talk to me a little bit more about that.
Yeah, so I'd say the dress is just for like a significant time in my life, and where maybe not the best things were happening. I was like, all right, I'm gonna take this dress and I'm gonna turn it into something like more positive and something that, I don't know, can speak to others and their experiences with, let's just, yeah, like, dramatic, like just, yeah. So, I think it's nice to bring attention to those issues that, aren't really talked about and, yeah, just, mistreatment of women is what I'll say, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So you're dealing with some really vulnerable qualities within this work, and I appreciate that and the way that you're able to kind of navigate that space and allow for it to speak to others, right? To feel moved by this. And, I'm curious if there was a moment in your critique process that stands out to you where you knew that you had it, you knew that you were doing the right working method here. This was the route to go.
I think, when was the time? I guess the fall show really kind of solidified, like, that same feeling is like what I really enjoy doing that. And I think just talking to Donna actually was the one to be like, oh, maybe experiment with like your clothes, or think about like the relationships you have not only to your bed sheets, but to like different materials that you have around your house, and or just things you've worn or things like that. So I really like dove into that and what she said and reflected on that, and that's kind of how the direction of that I went.
What's interesting about all of you is that you're dealing with, whether it's humans or non-human actors, the body as a site that is politicized, that is contested in our day and age, and how various identities face turmoil. And I think that that comes through in interesting ways very differently. You each have a very unique aesthetic sensibility. But you're getting at this kind of concept, and you call him Saxon here. Talk a little bit about your understanding of the body and body politics.
So my understanding of the body, I was very, like going into making my works, I was very focused on kind of highlighting things beyond me personally. I was very much so kind of taking a non-personal approach to these very human topics. Like these are people that I'm talking about, especially with like the baseball cards, and I was very focused on kind of just the basic, most I don't know, like achievement-based things that are important about them, not necessarily what they've done for, society, this or like interpersonal achievements, I guess I would say. And so I had to really like refocus how I was not only including like their own personal elements of their lives, but also including my own personal elements of my lives in my life in my work, because I was very focused on other and myself from what I was talking about, even though it's basically also about me as a trans person. So I guess kind of learning how to recenter my body, like myself within my work, while also centering others in my work is something I really had to figure out how to do, because I was just so focused on not myself.
It's something I remember from your critiques was the baseball card and the stats. Can you elaborate a little bit more about what you ended up with doing with the baseball cards and how you measure these people, their identities?
Yeah, so originally I had kind of reduced a lot of these people to, how many movies they've done, how many books they've done, how many awards they've received. And instead of kind of focusing on those ways of measuring success, I focused on sort of what they've done to my life specifically, both either in my development as a person or in my researching them, like how I feel about what they've done. And then I also highlighted maybe a few things that relates to how I feel about what they've like done. So there's a clear connection between my thoughts on the person alongside, what they've done to like highlight themselves as well, I guess, if that makes sense.
No, yeah, sure. So this kind of personal connection and how you intervene and measure and assess these individuals and what they've meant to you at a very deeply personal level. I'm going to pick on Parker a little bit here. So you were working with this historical archive and mistreatment of women. It's complicated, this history that you're touching on. Your own relationship to this media. Are you this handling of materials that you're choosing too? It feels very deeply personal choice that you're making, and I would like to know a little bit about where you come in to this work as well.
Yeah, so like right when I turned 20, I figured out that I had PMD, which is premenstrual disorder, which like basically means like to for my period is like absolute hell. And so I kind of like when I saw them like acting out in these like crazy ways, it was almost sort of like an expression of like what I wish I could do in that moment, in those moments where I was experiencing, you know, the symptoms. And so I think it was just like a natural choice. This is like coming at a time in my life where this like I can connect to these women in this way, you know, if not directly, then like somewhere. So yeah, I would say that that was like the main inspiration behind it.
The driver of
Yeah.
this. Okay, great. And others, T, really? Thoughts on this? Your own personal relationship to the work, your relationship and your understanding of the body and how it relates to politics, how it is politicized in our kind of current climate. Is there an urgency to the work that you're creating? Do you see the urgency? I see the urgency. I guess I'm leading there, but what is your relationship to the kind of messaging as you're working in your studio?
You want to go? Yeah, you think. Okay. Yeah. I would say, yeah, there's definitely some urgency within my work. I think especially in the Lutz piece because, I mean, it's right. I feel like we're kind of going backwards a little bit in how, like, the autonomy that we have over our bodies, in some senses. So, like, I think, and also, I mean, I was just having a conversation actually last night, like, having someone in power that doesn't necessarily like, respect women, I think is really interesting, and I think it's important to highlight that through my art. That like, just because that there's these people in power that might not respect women or think that they should have these rights over their body, I think it's important to still have a voice and show that through my art. And again, that the sense of reclaiming and like,
And scale too, right?
Yeah.
Like you can't avoid your piece. It's too large, right? It demands attention in the gallery space.
Yeah.
And I think there's something forceful in that
Yeah.
that you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm here for it. T.
So, I want to give my art statement. I mentioned working with the concepts of tranimal, and that's something that I really first learned about actually in Dawn's contemporary art and theory class last
What is
year.
the tranimal? Can you help us out?
Yeah, so sort of like this weird blurring of identity between like humanity and like non-human, and specifically the thing that I was reading about it and what I feel really, I guess, influenced me wanting to work with these animal subjects and using them to sort of convey issues within humanity is the article that I was specifically reading was about indigenous peoples and their relationship to the tranimal, and this author specifically, they were talking about how they see using like coyotes as an example and how they're treated as this invasive species that's like an issue just because people deem them an issue, but they were here first. And we're building on their land, and it's similar to how indigenous tribes are very often pushed off their land by the government despite them being there first, and how they're kind of seen by the government as an issue when they really aren't. So from there, that's where I kind of started thinking more about like the humanity of these animals, I guess. And like how I carved the lover's piece, the myth that that's specifically based off of is a Greek myth of Artemis and Callisto, and that's about like queer love, and you know how that is also very tied to the identity and how they're also kind of persecuted, all these marginalized groups for just existing. Oh, so in that myth, the Greek goddess Artemis, she has a lot of nymphs, and one of her nymphs is Callisto, who is one of the closest nymphs that like Artemis has, I guess, relationship-wise. And part of these nymphs that they're all virgins, but Callisto is specifically targeted by Zeus and is assaulted. And then, well, there are different variations of the myth. The one that I was kind of working off of was one where Hera gets jealous of Callisto and turns her into a bear, and then tricks Artemis into killing Callisto, not knowing that she is the bear, as a sort of like revenge. So.
And so you're integrating this kind of mythology into your work, and you're bringing in other kind of systems of knowledge as well. It's kind of collapsing of human and animal in the work, and I think all of you are actually engaging with systems of knowledge in interesting ways beyond maybe the binary too, right? Beyond maybe ways we classify people or animals, communities, and I'm curious a little bit about that. This. And where that comes in the research process, you have a research-based practice that's integrated into your studio practice, and what knowledge domains you're kind of playing in. Saxon, you're working with this kind of science museum taxonomy working method, and maybe you can start us off. How you arrived at that particular kind of system of knowledge, how that's maybe changed throughout the year as well.
So I kind of came to the form of the museum exhibits because my research was really focused on how to ensure that people learn what they read. Like I was really focused on infographics and kind of how the pairing of imagery with information really like solidifies what someone is learning. And I've always been a huge fan of museums. I go to museums as frequently as I can. I really like the science and natural history museums because of the large exhibits that people can go up to help them learn whatever's being taught, because of the kind of physical aspects that add to the already infographics that are helping people learn things. So I knew that those methods would be a really good way to ensure that people were grasping what I was trying to say, even though that these concepts are often really, really difficult for people to understand, just through my knowledge of talking about them with people and understanding how they've been received already by society.
And so I'm hearing in that you are an educator, and so I'm wondering if that role fits for anyone else, resonates with anyone else. This idea of thinking of yourself as teaching the viewer, educating the viewer about these systems of knowledge that you're playing in.
I wouldn't say I'm
Yes, you are. You're an education fellow here at the museum.
Well, that part, yes, but like with my art, I feel like it's on purpose because you, as the viewer, like are meant to create kind of your narrative or your explanation of the work. So, and it's kind of similar to like the whole shrine or devotional work kind of thing, because, I'm hearing these kind of small and maybe household shrines that you would have like privately, and those are very subjective. You go through those with whatever, emotions you might have that day or that, about the subject matter. So it's not really meant to. It is meant to educate in the way that these are more obscure points in history that I'm making people aware of, but like the pairing of the text and the image together is like supposed to be more or less ambiguous.
Okay. So there's more of an open-ended nature where Saxon has a bit of a didactic style to it. But I always think Saxon, it's like museum education with a wink, because you go out to the piece and you're kind of teased in by its familiarity, but then it's awkward to handle, or you just feel like they're too small in comparison to the scale of the work. And I think there's kind of a wink kind of quality to that. And I appreciate what you're saying, Parker, about the shrine-like quality. Bringing that into the museum, though, did that change for you into this public space? Because the shrine is such historically a more private devotional element.
Yeah, I was more or less thinking about like Catholic art like in the church, that like each person is kind of meant to like interact with first example that comes to my head is like, a statue, like maybe some of the finish on it will be rubbed off a certain body. Instead of like rubbing it or something like that. It's kind of like you interact with it how you want to interact with it. There's kind of this like predisposed kind of rule, but you don't have to follow it because it's like personal.
Okay, so if you had it your way, could we touch your art?
No.
Okay. Fair enough. Our relationship to viewers and how the personal understanding of knowledge and how it's conveyed.
Yeah, I think kind of going off of, like, I think the work that makes people think, which I love. Like, you bring like a very important part of history to light, and I think kind of connecting it to my own practice, like I try to do that too. But like it's more, I'm not connecting with a certain part of history because it's right now that it's happening. So it's like I'm trying to bring light to people's experiences that are happening right now, and like my experiences and how they connect to others too, because it's not just me that these things happen to, or that, no, it's also framing vulnerability as a source of strength, and not as this like, oh, like you're weak for showing these like emotions, showing these like kind of pieces of your body, pieces of yourself. Like, no, I think that's strong. That's what you should do. You should talk about these things, and like, yeah.
I think that's remarkable, truly. I think that there is strength in vulnerability, and I appreciate you sharing that with me. I love what you just did there too, in talking about Parker's work and recognizing the strengths and hers. And each of you has gone through these kind of critiques and have this cohort, have this community. I'm always sensitive. I'm hoping that there are some rising seniors, maybe not this time, but maybe they'll be listening on the video. But for those who are coming into their senior year, who will be going through this process like you, how did you all cultivate a community among yourselves? And how do you keep that sense of community going beyond this experience? You will walk across that stage, you will graduate, it will be an amazing moment. But can you keep this kind of sensitivity to one another's work, the sensitivity to others' work, going beyond this?
Yeah, I think it's been so like amazing working with, especially with Parker, just because we have a very similar like kind of so that was a source of inspiration, and also Emily too was another kind of, but also everyone, like everyone just helps each other out, like Gabby, Saxon, Tyler, we all just are very helpful towards each other, and I really have appreciated their feedback, and in our little critiques that we have just with the class, like it's so nice to like hear what you're doing right, or even hear what you're doing wrong, because you never know, like you don't know until you know. So yeah.
Yeah, that structure of support.
Yes. Yeah. So
I do feel like getting to do like before our main faculty critiques, like group critiques among ourselves, and getting that feedback is really nice. And I feel like also just having the senior studio space as a space for all of us to kind of be in there and like doing our works and getting opinions while we're making stuff. It's been really fun. And I definitely want to stay connected with everyone. I already talked. I mean, I know Emily and I were like, oh, who's going to be in Florida, so we can like maybe do pop-up shows and like all that. We're already talking about that. So I'm excited.
Other thoughts?
Yeah, I feel like we're like a little like family. Like we're very supportive of each other throughout the whole thing. Like even, I mean, I don't personally work a whole lot in the studio because I have like that space at home. So I didn't really experience like making it and then getting like being in there making with everyone, which like is fine. That's kind of like how I prefer things. But I would say that like, you know, I would be in the studio maybe and I'd be walking around and seeing people's stuff, and I would just come over and say like, hey, like what are you doing? Like, you know, I'm just looking at it. And I think even like something as small as that, like just checking in and just talking to somebody new that's the work is like part of why we come so close.
I also appreciate the fact that you have realized your working method and what works for you. And so coming back into the studio after working at home or working in like individual space, I think that's a part of this experience going through this year is figuring out how to continue this momentum that you have Any other thoughts? Any other advice you would give to the rising seniors, hopefully who will be watching this panel?
I mean, I definitely think that the best thing that your rising senior can do with this like art program specifically is to lean into it. Like, you're going to be doing activities that are difficult. I personally don't like being up at this panel. But if you just suck it up and do it, it'll be way easier. And like even the critiques and stuff that are really scary, like doing a presentation, it's just not fun. If you just do it, it'll be way easier when you don't have all these people around you like supporting you through it and telling you like, yeah, you're doing that right. Don't worry about what you're doing. So yeah, just leaning into the whole thing is the best thing.
Yeah, my piece of advice would be just like accept that maybe the art that you're making right now isn't the art that you will be making. Like accept the criticism, work with the criticism, not against it. Like be objective about your work and experiment, but don't go insane with the experiments. Stick to what you know.
That's a powerful piece of advice for any point in one's career, actually, is to roll with the criticism. And to grow, right? You've each gone through this huge growth spurt of a year and continuing that momentum, keeping it going and finding the strength and a critical eye. Each of you has really refined your aesthetic sensibilities, your concepts that you're dealing with, your message to the world. And I want to open up from that to our audience. Hello. If you have questions for our panel, we'd love to entertain some of those now. Yeah.
Usually most of the time when I go to art galleries, I don't feel comfortable touching the work. I don't it's right to do so. Is there a sign saying, please touch, or okay to touch?
There's in fact 3 signs that say you can touch the works in special little ways referencing each work too. Because like the baseball cards, you're free to take those cards with you. They're handouts. The museum has plenty to support any that gets lost or taken away. So yeah, I did think of specific ways to like articulate to people that they should be handling the works, but that was also why I liked the science museum exhibit format, because those kind of clue people into be touching the works anyways. Because you go to a science museum, you're not like, oh, should I be touching the big thing with the handles? Probably you should touch the thing with the handles. So that's kind of why I also use that format to like really clue people into be handling this stuff.
Other questions? Okay, follow-up question, yes, sir.
The studio, the shared studio, not individual. I would love one day to see a picture, whether it's a mess or not a mess. Preferably a mess.
That's a good piece of advice for the next panel, which we have next Thursday. So we'll think about that. It is kind of a mess. Yes.
Yeah.
Anyone else? Other questions?
I have a question for Parker. I've known her for a long time. I love her work, and I'm not myself like I've never studied art or anything. I just love looking at it, and the like juxtaposition of like bones and pearls and like bling and like darkness is such a cool combination. I just want to know about your choice of like materials to go with the pictures.
Yeah, so I've always liked like blending really like traditional like feminine kind of craft materials that you would associate with that, so like lace and pearls and ribbons and all that stuff. And so I like because I feel like myself, I do that with my own aesthetic, like the cutesy with the very dark thing. So like I was like that just kind of it makes sense. It also softens the blow, I would say, of what I'm doing, and it calls upon those like traditional notions of femininity that I'm trying to like, get at. So it also just does make it very pretty.
I'm obsessed with that little skull. Like
Yeah. But yeah, so there's a lot of like decisions behind it, but mostly to echo traditional feminine crafts.
Other questions?
No, keep going.
I was just, for all of you, if you were to envision your future, what would your museum or your pop-up, look like as of today, from what you learned from this past year, and it doesn't have to be what you did, it could be something totally different.
I like working with a lot of different mediums. This one I just so happen to do all printmaking, but I would really like to get more into sculptural works. I was trying to work that in, but I had too many ideas. So now that I got this one out, I'm like, okay, I can focus on other ideas and turn to some stuff that I maybe didn't get to do this time.
I know that I really want to build off of the ideas I kind of started working with, so I'm really excited about making more rugs and stuff like that, and maybe making decks of cards that relate to groups of people or certain areas, and then making rugs and engagement areas to connect to those cards. So that's kind of what I'm thinking about really specifically, but just making learning spaces to highlight maybe stories that aren't highlighted as much as they should be is really my focus.
My microphone is dead. Yeah, I would like to explore different subjects of female history. So I think I was about doing some stuff about witches. So kind of just for my own sake, like cycling through different subjects, and then until I feel like I've explored it enough, and then moving on to different ones. But I think I would keep the same medium. I do like to paint, pretty big paintings, so maybe returning to that a little would be nice at some point, and maybe trying to incorporate the archival industry with it.
I think I would love to do a pop-up with all the best shoots I've made over the past 2 years. I think it would be interesting, just a room full of them would be interesting. I don't know. I think that would be cool. I don't know. We'll see though. Yeah. So we'll do that.
Yeah. There are all these different threads. So you can play with many different expressions. Such an energizing moment. And then, Rachel, you have questions?
What for the students that are going to do this next year? Did you hit a roadblock at some point? How did you get through? Did you have peer support? Did you have to sit down and have a mental breakdown and come back? Is there one? And how do you? And is it the community in the classroom that helps you? Or what's your advice for the students next year?
I think for me at least, I definitely had many moments where I was kind of having too big of an idea and I needed to scale down or maybe understand that I'm just me and can't do everything I wanted to do. And I know that there was one very specific moment where I was having a little mental breakdown and I had to call my friend Francesca, and she was like, "You're fine, just you don't need to screen print, just print them. You need to screen print every single thing, that kind of stuff, and make my life as complicated as possible." So I think having that kind of support system is really important, and definitely the senior, the other art seniors, where that support system was, because they had the insights to say you're making good stuff or you're not, because it's hard to ask your STEM your friends what they think of your stuff if it's up to par, because yeah, it's great. You make me otherwise.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I feel like having the studio space and being surrounded by people who have seen how your work has developed over the year and how you've been working through these ideas. Because I know I would ask people all the time, what are you doing? I also had way too many ideas and wasn't sure what I wanted to do or felt like I was spreading myself too thin. So just being able to ask other fellow art students who are familiar with your practice, you don't really have to explain too much. It's nice to get that outside feedback and support.
I hit a roadblock during winter break, or no, not winter break, spring break. And I realized that I had to make 4 new pieces in 1 week, which I did do. And that I definitely
definitely have several mental breakdowns. But you just have to like, even if you don't, you know, need like constructive criticism on what you're working on, you still should like not suffer in silence and just vent. If you're very stressed out, it's better to just like
What does that
express
look like for you? Like in practical terms, what is that expression?
Just texting my friends and being like, I'm freaking out, I'm dying, this is awful, all of those things. It helps.
So commiserating, yes.
Yeah, because we're all kind of going through the same thing. Like, take yourself out of this and realize that there's a bunch of other people in the same situation as you, also freaking out, exact same. It does help to like get together and be like, do this, guys. You know? So let's do
The
it.
determination there. Okay, all right, Charlie.
Yeah, I think everything everyone said is great advice. And I think also try new things. Like, I feel like that's just try it. Like, just do it because, like, why not? Even if you're like, what are you doing? Like, why am I making lips on a wood? You don't know, and you're just like, no, yeah, this is good. Just, I'm going to try it. I'm going to do it. And yeah, so I think trying things.
So you've learned to trust yourself.
Yes, definitely. I think that's through the process you will. Like, once, yeah.
Okay, I think that's some great pieces of advice. I want to close today by asking each of you, I'd like to this kind of future focus of wherever you go from here, but I'd really like to know, it can be anything, it can be outlandish. What's one dream you have yet to realize in this process in this year? It doesn't have to relate to studio art at all. What is the dream for you? Well, we're going to start with Charlie. You're going to change up.
Okay. The dream for me, I think, I don't know. I think, well, I was talking about it today with my family actually, but I think it would be really cool to like be a full-time artist one day and just chill at the beach and be an artist. I think you have to work. It would be really nice, but after working, of course, yeah. Because I'm working right after graduation, and I'm just going to try to, you know, work hard, and so that one day is a possibility to just be an artist and have my work, you know. Yeah.
Right, so full-time artist for Charlie at the beach. Perfect.
I would like to work, and my biggest dream right now is moving to Australia.
Great, because you've had an amazing year in Australia. Okay.
Eventually, I'd love to have my own print studio, like.
Yeah.
My own studio, like, whether it be like a press or something, I don't know, I just want to have
For your own
print.
production, or you
Yeah.
want to have like a community of printing artists? I like this.
I love working in print studios, the one we have here, I love it, and I would love to be here.
My dream isn't really about art specifically, but I really like to see all the national parks in the country. I think that'd be really cool. I'm very curious about what's going on out there. And I think it could also make my art better too. So.
All right, well, I want to say, if you're over 65, I think you can get it.
I'm almost there.
All right. Well, thank you all so much. So, can we please?